Mic check.
Mic check.
Hamitakiafi. Tepete jine nashle. Dakota michaze matro wayakapi. Is a word that we say when we talk about these topics, and it was really good to hear one of our brothers here, our uncles, lead off this presentation with the Thanksgiving address of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the peoples. I'm not sure which of the nations he's from, but I recognize that he is from the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. I noticed that he's from that, so I want to pay my respects to him. Is it okay? Sound check? Is it okay?
Sound check in the back.
Can you hear me? So I want to say thank you, Opata Tanka, to him. And one of the things we talk about this, whether we talk about this whole resistance for reframing our relationship to the sacredness of Mother Earth, and that's really what it's about. And that's what I've been looking at within the messages that are coming out with Occupy Wall Street movement. And we say, Inamaka Michoni Makuth, Mother Earth gives us life. And I come from Minnesota on both Dene, or Navajo, Dene, and Dakota. And it's really good to be here once again, and thank you for all the organizers who made this possible. And thank you for the presentation of our sister here, and Anishinaabe, our nation. And thank you for the other Native Indigenous peoples who are here. Thank you for the chief who brought us coffee at the table. But as I look at this, I wanted to talk about, where do we go from here? And it's very important to have this context of protocol. When we live in the homeland of our indigenous peoples, as part of a process and protocol that we have in our indigenous network, is that we respect the protocols of reaching out and asking for permission from the indigenous peoples in whatever area we're at. And those are protocols that have been established for thousands and thousands of years. When somebody comes, for example, from a faraway place and they're coming with a purpose, they don't just walk right into our village. Maybe they have a representative and they even keep their families way back, and they send a representative, and they'll stand there at the edge of the village, and they'll just stand there, whoever the representative is, and they'll wait. And then that visualization, imagine that. And in the village, we have some people who protect our village, because everyone has a place in our structure, in our society. Everyone has an important role. No one's left out. So there's people that have a responsibility to keep watch on your village. So they already noticed that people are coming, even before they send a representative to stand right there where they're visible. And now we have a person standing there, and we know that they want to come in for some reason. But we may have other agenda items that we're working on at the time. We already made plans for the day. We made plans for that night, the next day. And it may take some time for a person to be recognized. But these are protocols that we have. Even a couple of days may have gone by. But maybe someone has taken them some food and just placed the food there for them, so they're taken care of. maybe some extra hide if it's cool. So we do respect our visitors. And finally, when the time is right, someone will go over there. And someone that can translate too. They may not speak the same language, but we had mechanisms for communication. So with that, they go over and ask, why are you here? And they will say why they're here, and then bring them in. So those are protocols on how we communicate to each other as Indigenous peoples here of what our brothers and sisters of the East call Turtle Island. Some of us in the modern terminology, we lump Alaska, Canada, the United States as North America. We call it North America. So I was thinking of this protocol because where is our protocol for communication and developing relationships with each other? And as quickly as we try, as we have an agenda here, we try to ask each other, who are you and where you come from? That's the beginning of a protocol. When I come here to Toronto, I met some people who said they didn't use the word settlers, but they said they live here and they're not native. And I said, where do your people come from? And some had to really think. Some might have been Ukrainian, descendants of Ukrainian. And so make people think of not only where do you come from, but one of the challenges that we do put out there within our Indigenous Environmental Network and the work that we do is to help humanity, to help the two-legged people, to really reevaluate what your relationship is to the sacredness of the female creative principle of Mother Earth. Very important. And as you occupy Wall Street, I ask you to reflect on a couple of messages and demands that have come from Indigenous peoples. One of them is from the American Indian Movement of Denver that put out a message in Occupy Denver. And I recognize that comes from our brothers and sisters who put their minds and their spirit, their thought together. And I also recognize one of our brothers that we network with all the way in Southern California, his Lenape, Delaware. His people are originally out this way. And he's the one that makes us think deep about these things of our relationship as Indigenous peoples, about where are we going, and our own history of understanding colonization, understanding the concepts of decolonization. And he also put out a message as well. But the message overall that I hear consistently from our Indigenous brothers and sisters is that a reminder that you are on the island upon which our Indigenous ancestors lived and thrived for thousands and thousands of years. But that's not in the past tense, like our sister reminded. That's not in the past tense. We're not a distant memory from way long ago. We are thriving. We are developing healthy communities despite all the symptoms of colonization, building upon the resiliency of our people and are using our traditions and language revitalization. But a reminder that we were here first. The Kogi of Colombia, the indigenous people, they sent a message out back in the early 1990s to the younger brothers, and they called themselves the older brothers. To the younger brothers, meaning the settlers, the colonists who came here. And I remember that because they said that we have to continue to remember our role and our place in our history. So we are your older brothers and we are your older sisters. And there's, for the ones who have immigrated here by choice, are not by choice. And there's nothing you can do about that. So it's very important to have opportunities like this, to have dialogue and communication of the original Aboriginal people, the First Nations of these territories and these lands. But we also have to take a moment to recognize that there are certain demands that we have put forward that are quite consistent. One of those demands that be mindful of how manifest destiny, on how conquests have taken place. And there's been many, not only oral interpretation of that from our peoples, from the east coast to the west coast, from Alaska all the way down to the Horn of Argentina, the Western Hemisphere. And that is understanding the concept of colonization and the role of the church and the role of the government, the colonists, and how to utilize the church to justify what they did. So part of this mindfulness of the church documents and a demand that has been put forward is to support the repeal of the papal bull. Repeal the papal bull. Very important. And that actually established a mechanism for right of Christian discovery. We were called pagans. We weren't civilized. And so this was the mechanism that they utilized. So in many of our documents in the States, and it's no different in Canada, even though the legal mechanisms of treaties, the relationship of Canada, Indigenous peoples, and the Crown, the Queen in England, and the colonists on the state side, is that Indian law has been based upon the papal bull, the right of discovery, the doctrines of discovery. So we have to always be mindful of that as you move forward in demanding a systematic change. The whole economic construct has been based upon this, the taking of land. The taking of land as well as defining not only land but people as property rights, slavery. Another main demand is from the Occupy movement that came forward from the American Indian movement in Denver was to support and endorse the right of Indigenous peoples to the international right of self-determination. We are Indigenous, we are international because we are sovereign nations. And we have to believe that. And part of that is supporting the implementation in Canada at every level of government, municipalities, even the work you do, endorse and implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. I was taking notes as I was preparing for my presentation. When they say the system is broken, how many of you believe that the system is broken? My view from the shore is that it was made to be this way. And IEN supports the necessity for civil society, for peoples, our grassroots people of the world, our popular movements, to reclaim their democracy, despite however long that's going to take and whatever process that's going to be. IEN has been participating in social forums, popular movements, and we were part of the planning of the U.S. Social Forum. And we successfully had our second one in Detroit, which was the example of everything that's gone wrong a couple of years ago. but also it's a mechanism to be principled as Indigenous peoples. To ask the serious questions is, how do these social forms, how do they relate to Indigenous peoples? What are their demands as they're moving away from a capitalist system to socialism, for an example? And how does socialism address the rights of Indigenous peoples? These are serious questions that we ask, not only in our network, but with our Indigenous leadership. Because I'm not sitting here as a regular stakeholder. I'm a member of a nation. We are rights holders. We are rights holders. Here in Toronto, many of the people who are here and many other relatives, we are the original peoples. We are the older brothers and older sisters. And there's nothing you can do about that. When I go to Europe, I humble myself. I'm a younger brother. I'm a younger brother when I go to Europe. I just came back from South Africa in December. I'm a younger brother, and I humble myself. I checked out the Occupy Wall Street website, the unofficial de facto online resource, they say. Because I wanted to learn more. What is this movement about? They say it's people-powered movement, that it has spread now over to 100 cities in the United States. They didn't make any reference to Canada, but it spread to municipalities and cities in Canada, I'm sure. And has done actions up to 1,500 cities globally. I do want to recognize that, and those of you who've been part of the Occupy movement, give yourself some thanks. Give yourself some thanks. Because I'm also saying we need this movement in our Indigenous movements. But it has to be based around principle. On the webpage it says it is a movement fighting back against the corrosive power of major banks and multinational corporations over the democratic process and the role of Wall Street in creating an economic collapse that has caused the greatest recession in generations. The movement aims to fight back against the richest 1% of people that are writing the rules of an unfair global economy that is foreclosing on our future. As Clayton talked about, there are concerns for equity in the participation and principles in the participation of Indigenous peoples and the inclusion of our perspectives, concerns, and recommendations for change. I chose to show that small clip of one of our old warriors of the American Indian movement, John Trudell, who lost his companion in the battle and the war against the United States and its colonial practices. And his companion was killed in Nevada, in the homelands of the Niue Sogabia. We have casualties in this war. We have casualties in this war. It is a life and death situation for our Indigenous peoples who speak out on these issues. We cannot do it alone to create change. That's why we do need this Occupy movement, but we need a movement based upon principle. We do have some questions that emerge as we ask about the Occupy movement. Within the principles of solidarity, within the People's Assembly process, what is the process for outreach and inclusion of our Indigenous peoples? And who do you reach out to? Again, we are nations, but also through the process of colonization and the policies of the governments of Canada and the United States, they relocated, some forced relocation of our women, of our men, to the urban areas and the cities. And now we have third generation in some of these urban city areas. Is Occupy a movement or a moment? Is it only a moment in time when people came together to mobilize? Or is it a real movement? I see that Occupy is a tactical frame. 99%, when you lift up the 99%, that's a strategic frame. But part of that strategic frame, who are they? Who are we? And who are they? When we ask the question of take back from what? Take back from whom? Some serious critical questions that have to be asked. Occupy is a popular movement, like I mentioned, and it's diverse. We must be clear on dialogue, protocols for dialogue, and understanding that there is diversity and not be locked into the divisions. What we are dealing with is a system that knows how to instill in people a sense of disempowerment, of immobilization, and paralysis. Wall Street and the US financiers, the corporateers, the profiteers, the puppeteers, who are part of an economic globalization campaign that wants us to be puppets and only good consumers. It is to keep people isolated, to feel that there is no possibility for social change. Within the work that we do within the Indigenous Environmental Network, Indigenous peoples are taking on some of the largest corporations in the world. We didn't really choose this, it chose us. In our history with the Indigenous Environmental Network, one of the principles of our elders and our youth who formed IEN is that we have to be accountable to our community. But there's too many lone warriors out there who are not accountable. So when I speak about our position as Indigenous Environmental Network, we just passed the 20-year mark. It comes from a long process of dialogue with communities on the front line of struggle. Of course, we don't represent all Indigenous peoples. We have a diversity as much as you are diverse here. But we also are some of the strongest supporters of self-determination, strongest supporters of our jurisdictional right to protect our homelands, support of sovereignty, and to address one of the most serious isms that exists within our communities. That's a symptom of colonization, and that's internalized oppression. Internalized oppression. Many of you that fight for change within your own groups, in your own struggles, the women's movements, the youth movements, the gay, the lesbian movements. You all know what internalized oppression is as well. That's why we are going through our own process of decolonization of ourselves as Indigenous peoples. Within the work we do in taking on these corporations, sometimes it seems like there's nothing that we can do to prevent the international corporations, the transnational corporations, from taking possession of Mother Earth and subjecting humanity to the dictatorship of capital. Again, we cannot do this alone. We're being more strategic these days, as our young man, Clayton Thomas Mueller, explains our strategies and our tactics on taking on not only these Trans-Canada Corporation and Enbridge, but there are many other corporations operating in the tar sands and the mineral extractive industries in Canada, and those mining companies are operating in the homelands of our brothers and sisters in the global south. And we know about all the tactics that we're facing and what you are facing and you will face. There's a tremendous police and military forces. It's their doctrine. It's their policies that are developed to defend their system and to fight you on your demand. And that demand is that we have a better world. What is wrong with that? So I must say that within the constituency that we work with, these communities that are affected on the front line of unsustainable development, and this extends globally as well, because our work has extended globally with Indigenous peoples throughout the world. And recognizing our foundation, like this invocation, this Thanksgiving address of our brother, is using that as the foundation of making our decisions. But you have to understand, again, the symptoms of internalized depression. Many of our people have been taught and conditioned through the propaganda of a colonial system to try to wipe away our Indigenous tribal memory of who we are, to try to wipe away and destroy our relationship to the sacredness of Mother Earth, so that we no longer pray in our old traditional ways, so that we no longer have our language, so that we will become part of the melting pot of society. Again, this has been a mechanism utilized even in that old world where a lot of settlers came from, as a doctrine of the church, as a doctrine of the kingdoms, to remove the people from their profound spiritual relationship with Mother Earth, so that they don't have a face or identity anymore, so that all the implementation of an industrialized world, industrialization, so that we no longer have a sense of what community is, so that we no longer know what our relationship is to Mother Earth. That's what we're fighting. So as Indigenous people in our network, we are not fighting for fair distribution of the wealth that is generated by a system that rapes our Mother Earth, and a system that gets its wealth at the expense not only of Indigenous peoples, but all peoples of the world, workers, women, our youth. Our Indigenous environmental network is not about a fight for benefit sharing in an economic system that commodifies nature, privatizes and trades nature, within programs called payment for environmental services, and carbon trading regimes that use trees and carbon and now soil in the atmosphere and air in the atmosphere as offsets. That's one of the main mitigation plans of Canada and the United States. We have come to a time where everything is becoming commodified. Life is becoming commodified. And that's part of Wall Street. Humans are not separate from nature. Private property of who? Poor people? Private property of our Indigenous peoples? We're fighting a legal system that defines property rights. Within the environmental justice movement, both in Canada and the United States, environmental laws have been defined to give even more rights to the corporations. It's hard to fight these battles when our people don't have standing. We have to fight and have money to have standing to take a case into the courts. So the legal system has to be changed. The legal system in Canada, the United States, industrialized, as members of this whole family of industrialized countries, is not designed to protect the people. The 1% have secured their property rights. The system treats nature like a slave. The system doesn't ask the river, what is your rights? They didn't ask James Bay, Quebec, and the whole dam. They didn't ask the water. They didn't ask the rivers, what are your rights? So we have to ask these questions. That's why we are looking for systemic change, and that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about in my final statements. Because if we're asking for change, what are we asking for? What kind of economic system are we fighting for? When we talk about our relationship to nature, to Mother Earth, I remember our elders, when I was a young man, I remember people went to Geneva. Leon Skinador. Others went to Geneva. Thomas Banyaka from the Hopi Nation. And I remember some of their interventions as they spoke like I'm speaking now. They said, I'm here to speak for those that cannot speak for themselves. They're there to speak for the birds, the animals, the fish, the plants, and the trees. And we understand when we say snow has memory. The Inuit people, some of them say the glaciers have memory. Our history is in the ice culture, but we know that ice is melting. Again, the indigenous knowledge has a clear definition of what our relationship is to the sacredness of Mother Earth, and defines our relationship to the glaciers, to the rivers. So we are part of an emerging movement, locally, nationally, globally, and this is an alliance working for the rights of Mother Earth, the rights of nature. And our challenge is for the Occupy movement to learn about this, to incorporate that into your understanding. It isn't going to solve all the problems, but it is the key to change the mentality and the way society thinks, to come full circle back to understanding what your place is as you walk upon the sacredness of Mother Earth. It's been part of our prophecy that someday these people who come to our shores, they'll be lost. They wouldn't understand the relationship because it's been taken away from them. But soon they will come to remember, and they'll be standing up to take their place in understanding what that relationship is. So we have to have a new paradigm. And also we understand all the problems with capitalism. But what are we for if we're against capitalism? We're starting to look at, again, back to just really quickly, in the work that we're doing in our Native or Indigenous energy and climate campaign, we're taking on some of the largest corporations and some of the richest people on this planet, the oligarchies. And that's scary. Do we as Indigenous people have political power? Are we putting our communities at risk? When we started the Tar Sands campaign, the chief of the Athabascan Chippewa First Nation said, as I'm putting my life out there for my people, don't abandon me, don't leave me alone. Are you going to be there to defend me? This is a life and death situation. So that's why we need the Occupy movement of the world, to make another world possible, to make another Canada possible, to make another United States possible, a better world possible. And to bring public attention to those ultra-rich individuals who benefit most from and who are most responsible for the deepening climate crisis that is destabilizing our global ecosystem and our economy and devastating Mother Earth. These billionaires who profit most from pollution and in turn push government policies that promote more fossil fuels. That's why we have to always watch our back. We stopped the Keystone Pipeline for right now, but TransCanada and billionaires like the Koch brothers, the oligarchy, the Koch brothers, K-O-C-H, if you're out there, this is me. We're taking you on. But it's not just us as Indigenous people. But it's not just us, it's the world. It's the world who's waking up. And you can try to divide us with your billionaire monies, your profiteer monies, your puppeteer monies, but we're not going to be divided because the Occupy movement is learning on how to organize and be principled and to confront oppression, undo racism, and all those other isms that keep us divided. So this is a very important moment here in Toronto. I'm glad to be invited here. There's not many opportunities I can speak along with our young man Clayton. We're so busy that he's speaking here and I'm speaking over there, but this is one of the rare times we spoke together. So I thank you for creating that opportunity. But there are many challenges, but together we can win. Together we have to look at what our strategies is, definitely. And we are in an economic and environmental crisis. Mother Earth cannot provide any more of her resources to a capitalist system that is not sustainable. The fish are being depleted from the oceans. We know this, but it seems like they're resisting us. So only by working together can that 99% gain the full measure of justice that we all deserve. And it is true as Indigenous people, as we look and we have asked those questions, where are we in that 99%? Where are we in that 99%? As Clayton said again, when we develop movements, we do organizing, develop campaigns for change, we have to confront, again, those isms that keep us divided and look for true equity and justice for all. We have to do that. We don't have a choice. So with that said, that concludes my few remarks. And this is very important when we're working for Mother Earth. When Mother Earth gives us life, we have to understand that creative principle, the protection of Mother Earth, but also understanding with our Dene people, I've been taught about understanding the importance of Father Sky and Mother Earth, part of that creative principle, and the role of all of our people, and those natural laws that we have, not the natural laws and the legal constructs, but our natural laws of Mother Earth. There will be a time when we will be fighting over water if we don't change the way we're living. There will be a time when we'll be fighting for energy in some parts of the world that is happening right now. Some of you that keep watching what I do, Facebook and YouTubes, I talked about systemic change, not climate change. I talked again about the need to really be true to yourself as activists, as change makers. Be true to yourself, however you define that. And make offerings that maybe not be your way, but here in this land, put out offerings. Recognize those stones out there Recognize those trees and that little bush. Put some offerings in the water, in the rivers. Put up thanks every morning just to have food. Humility and humbleness has been part of my teachings. So these are things you can do. One of my brothers that passed away, they used to travel in this direction from Red Cliff, Wisconsin. His Anishinaabe named Walk Preset. One time he was a speaker at the Land, Air, and Water Conference in Oregon. And I was done with my speaking, and I went to where he went, and he was lecturing in the lecture hall. And he was laying on the table with the microphone. And he stood up and he adopted the whole assembly of the people in that lecture hall. He said, now you are my brothers and sisters. I adopt you as my brothers. You are Native American now. And I was standing by the door. I said, oh no, what did you do? What did you do? They're going to be, declaring their rights, and treaty rights now. But his purpose of that, he said, is that I'm tired. He said, I'm tired. I'm getting sick. The pressure. He says, you people have a high expectation that the Native Americans, us being one with the earth, that somehow this burden is on us. It's not on us. Take this responsibility. Take this responsibility and share it on the deepest, profound spiritual awareness and reawakening that you can ever experience. Because that's what scares these corporations. They're scared of our sister when she speaks like that. She's scared of this man who talked about the original instructions and the Thanksgiving address. Because I've been at some of the largest meetings of the mining corporations. I've seen the senior attorneys of some of the largest mining corporations of the world. And it's true, they don't care about you, they don't care about me. Money is the bottom line. But they get scared when I take out my tobacco pouch. They get scared when we speak our language. So this is part of a spiritual movement. Thank you very much.